You know, on President's Day, most of us tend to think of the finest presidents, those on the coins, the currency, or on the monuments from D.C. to Rushmore. But not every president has had such a, let's just say, sterling legacy. And Yannick, which presidents are at the very bottom of the barrel here? I mean, everyone says Nixon, but he did some stuff. There's some presidents where you have to really struggle to say what was their accomplishment.
Nixon's very controversial about this. Defenders of Nixon will point to China and the SALT I treaty with the Soviet Union and getting out of Vietnam. Detractors will say, well, he took a whole first term to get out of Vietnam, plus Watergate, plus mishandling the energy crisis, the rise of inflation. So there are pluses and minuses to Nixon, but he deserves to be toward the bottom of the barrel. There's Andrew Johnson, whom I mentioned, who really missed a tremendous opportunity to help reconstruct the South and work with Congress. Before the Civil War, Franklin Pierce and James Buchanan get low marks because they really did not do much to prevent the drift of the country toward secession and Civil War. Scandal-plagued administrations also suffer a lot. Ulysses S. Grant, Warren G. Harding, especially in the 20th century, get low marks because their administrations were so pockmarked by scandal. Although Ulysses S. Grant started to rise a little bit out of the failure category because of things like working against the Ku Klux Klan and trying to assure some rights for African Americans during the Reconstruction period.
I'll go around. If you could add one more face to Rushmore, who would you add?
Oh boy,
wow.
That's a tough question.
That's a tough one.
I guess I would go with FDR, and not just, yes, he clearly had a checkered time in office, but as we'll get into in the second half hour, I would argue that he helped set up the country for one of its most prosperous periods from the 1950s to the 1980s.
I'm with you. And look what he inherited. We forget that, you know, at the lowest depths here, at least in modern America. Tom?
I probably would agree with you too, but if I just had to stir the pot a little bit and get you guys angry, I would throw a name out there as wild and reckless as Bill Clinton, and here's why. He's the last president, American president, where we all, regardless of partisanship, remember when the times were good in the country, financially. It was a good time for all. Andrew's giving me the look.
You are going to stir stuff up.
But that's what I would say.
Dominic's got an interview lined up with him. No, Yannick?
Well, in the interest of bipartisanship, I'd mention two, and maybe you could have half a face of each. Harry Truman and Dwight D. Eisenhower. I think Harry Truman set the stage for containment and successfully fighting the Cold War, showed a lot of common sense, which isn't that common, good Midwestern horse sense. The Berlin airlift, the Marshall Plan, the Truman Doctrine, all excellent. And then Dwight D. Eisenhower, 8 years of peace and prosperity and progress also, including in civil rights with the desegregation of Little Rock and the 1957 Civil Rights Act. So both good, solid presidents.
You know, this one, it was only one term, obviously, but my gosh, what LBJ both had to deal with and did in one term. And obviously Vietnam is enough of a debit that he doesn't get, the what if stops there, I guess. But you know, if people want to think about the civil rights movement and one of the people who played a pivotal role in it, forget the motivations, look what he did there. I mean, the war on poverty. I mean, he did things that today would be impossible to do in Washington, maybe albeit with a different Congress. And then there's the what if. What if JFK had lived longer? And he certainly captured the idea of what a president should look like and be like, and the flaws and the family and everything else. But
so did this president. And we see how things have worked out.
Still got a little bit of time left.
That's true.
It's for the best that there is no more room on Mount Rushmore, so we can't really have this debate.
Yannick, fantastic job as always on this. Now, up next, we're going to keep our focus on President's Day, and we're bringing an encore presentation about the aforementioned FDR. Look back at the legacy of perhaps the most influential president of the 20th century, and his progressive legacy is now under attack like never before.